In the interest of time, because we have four papers, I suggest that we get started. Okay, thank you, everyone. So in the interest of time, I suggest that we get started. The first talk is going to be given by Dr. Ali Ahmad from the American University of Beirut. He will discuss nuclear power in the Middle East, the cost of energy security. The floor is yours.
Use this one?
Yes, it's working. Sit here.
لعبت الحين هذه النيوكلير
أكيد. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to AUB and IFI. The topic of my presentation today has been in the back of my mind for a while. I've been working on nuclear issues in the Middle East for the past 4 or 5 years, and I always questioned the linkages between energy security and nuclear. But I'm so grateful for this conference, for this opportunity to finally collect my thoughts to share with you. This is a rather romantic picture of the Al Baraka power plant in Abu Dhabi. And the United Arab Emirates is one of the 6 countries in the Middle East that are developing nuclear power programs. Clearly, the level of commitment in each country, is different. For example, we have countries that already have operating nuclear reactors, such as Iran. We have countries that are very close to operating nuclear reactors, such as the UAE. We have countries that haven't started construction yet, or they started the very early stages of pre-construction, such as Turkey and Egypt. And we have countries that have zero physical nuclear facilities, but they have serious commitment to nuclear power, such as Jordan and Saudi Arabia. In terms of nuclear capacity, I think we can think of 3 types of nuclear capacity. The first one is operational capacity, which, as I mentioned, only Iran currently has this type of capacity. The UAE is very soon will become or will generate electricity from nuclear. But if you look at the planned capacity, the committed capacity, if you add them all together, it will reach 17, 18 gigawatt at some point soon. And this ultimately makes nuclear power a reality in the region. Now, the third type of capacity is the planned capacity. So this is not confirmed or not 100% confirmed, and we see large capacity in Turkey, in Saudi Arabia, and these 2 countries, there are major question marks about their nuclear programs and in what direction it will go in the future. Now, I'm sorry, I'm going to close the door. Okay, so for Saudi Arabia, there's some uncertainty about their nuclear program. In 2012, they're proposing the building of 16 reactors when they established the King Abdullah City for atomic and renewable energy. But recently, apparently this plan is now shelved, and they are talking about maybe two reactors, but also some interest in small reactors. Jordan, for a long time, has been in talks with the Russians to build large reactors, but because of financing reasons, this deal is now off, and also thinking about small reactors. Now, when I started researching nuclear power and nuclear economics in the region and going around interviewing people and promoting institutions, the first question I would ask, why are you interested in nuclear power? And almost immediately I would be given a lecture on how nuclear power improves energy security. And that's why I mentioned in the beginning that it has been always in the back of my mind to challenge this paradigm. Now, if you look at official statements, there are 3 major rationales for nuclear power. The first one is energy security. One major rationale also is energy substitution, especially when oil prices are high. There is some argument that it's better if we export this oil instead of burning it domestically. The third argument is to use nuclear power as a sort of technological advancement and create a base of highly skilled workers. It would be too naive or too simplistic if we talk about nuclear power, not to mention the unofficial rationale. There's always an element of prestige that nuclear power countries are a club, and joining this club reflects some sort of moving forward. There is also some historical and institutional pressure. This is very prevalent in the case of Iran and Egypt, where you have generations and generations of nuclear engineers who need jobs, and if the nuclear program is not there, they will lose their major interest. And I'm sure also you are aware of the geopolitical rebalancing factors, particularly in the case of Iran and Saudi Arabia. Now, I think when we go to the definition of energy security, maybe it has evolved like many terms that we use, sustainability, one of them. It has evolved over the years, but perhaps one can argue that the term was coined in the early 70s in what follows the Arab oil embargo and all these pictures of long lines waiting to fill their tanks. And I think back then there was a major issue of ensuring future supply of oil and other resources. Since then, the concept has evolved, and now energy security does not only refer to resources, it actually refers to the whole much more complex system, and energy itself reflects to a much more complex system. So for any policymaker to refer to nuclear power as reflects energy security, it's not only, I think, is wrong, it reflects massive misunderstanding of how energy works and the complexity of energy. Another thing with energy security is that it was coined as something in the interest of the consumers. So we don't want consumers to suffer disruptions anymore. But the more we look at it nowadays, it's actually more of a concern for the producers. And I will talk a bit about this later in more details. So the first exercise I did is that clearly if you go through official statements, you will see a lot of mentioning of energy security when officials in the region talk about their nuclear programs. But I wanted to quantify this a bit further. So what I did is that for each country of the 6 countries, I went to and chose 2 of the major newspapers in these countries, one in English, one in Arabic, and using some advanced Google search archiving methods, I calculated the number of articles that has certain commonalities, such as have energy security as a sentence, nuclear power, and then also some other phrases, and see how many articles are published in these countries between 2008 and 2018. 2008 because this is the time when most of the nuclear programs in the region started. And what you see here is actually the number of articles in these just 2 sample newspapers of these countries. You can see strong correlation with the number of articles in each country's published and the status of development of nuclear programs in these countries. For example, the 3 countries that are currently close or or operating in nuclear power have the best communication about how energy security is linked to their nuclear power program. Other countries less so. So clearly counting articles is easy, so it doesn't count as an academic research, I suppose. So I went a step further by doing content analysis, so looking further at these articles and what sort of messages we get from these articles. And there are 3 groups of main arguments that either supporting the concept of energy security or linking it to nuclear power. The first one is that nuclear energy is in the interest of the nation. This is the first one. The second one is energy security will ultimately lead or is energy independence. And the third one is that with nuclear energy we will have localization and create a large base of skilled workers. And Each one of these arguments actually, when you look on the ground, on the reality, it is far from being correct. For example, all the or most of the nuclear projects in the region now, they serve more the vendors than actually the host countries. I was in Moscow last month to interview Rosatom, the Russian supplier, and I met with former Rosatom people and analysts as well. And to my surprise, I realized, I was told that Rosatom employs more than 200,000 people and returns billions and billions of dollars for the Russian economy. Now, of course, the nuclear market inside Russia is limited, so it's clearly profitable for Russia to export, to keep the jobs and export all these technologies, and let alone the political aspect of it. Energy independence, or assuming that energy independence is energy security, also shows a huge lack of understanding of energy. Even countries like Japan in 2011, which we think is a very developed country, overnight, they lost a third of their energy supply, and for the next 10 years or 8 years, they had to rely on very expensive natural gas. So even if Japan cannot be energy independent, or the US cannot be energy independent, why should we, or how could we? The energy localization also is very interesting because it's interesting because in early or the late 2000s, when all these nuclear programs started, localization was at the top of the. I remember from my interviews with the atomic energy commissions in the region, like it was maybe after energy security was the second argument that we want to localize the technology. And now, if you ask them, I think it's not there. So I think there's a realization that they could not support this argument, and this argument was flawed from the beginning. Let's jump into some numbers here. So we cannot talk about nuclear in the vacuum. Nuclear or any source of energy has to be compared to other sources, and one comparison is the cost. And what we see here is the cost difference between nuclear and solar and wind since the beginning of nuclear projects in the region until now. Clearly, back in 2009, nuclear was much more cost competitive because of two things. The first one is the cost of renewables back then was too high, even though since then we knew that the cost of renewable was going down. And this is something I'll talk about in more details in a second. But also oil prices at that period was a bit high. So there was some economic merit of having nuclear back in 2009. But as we moved forward with the massive decline of the costs of renewables, then the cost difference, the breaking point was 2013, where we are no longer talking about costs, comparing nuclear to renewables. And I think now, quite frankly, we should not be talking about cost competitiveness of renewable versus nuclear. I think the argument is already clear. I think now the main challenge is dispatchability, is not the cost. We know that the renewables are much cheaper, especially in the region. We are seeing cost of renewables going down to 3 cents per kilowatt hour, which is ridiculously cheap. So it's no longer a matter of cost, it's a matter of dispatchability. But I'll come to that. Now, this is an example of the opportunity cost that can be incurred by a country in the region when they go nuclear. So in 2013, the UAE started the construction of the Al Baraka power plant. Of course, the lead time here, I'm just talking about construction lead time. If you take into account the financial planning, the preparedness for the country to become a nuclear country, lead time can be much longer. So in 2013, the UAE, the price of solar CSP was around 20 cents per kilowatt hour. And I'm focusing on CSP because CSP has better dispatchability than PV because it involves some storage and it has more flexibility with meeting demand. Fast forward 5 years to today, now the last bid for CSP in the UAE is 7.3 cents per kilowatt hour, which is very, very close to the price estimated nuclear price of the electricity by the nuclear power plant. And moving forward, this will be cheaper even. And if you can see, solar PV has even better performance. Now, why this is important? This is important because this is a mistake most analysts do when they compare nuclear to other renewables, not only with costs, but also with performances, which is ignoring the lead time. So for a country, if they decided to build a nuclear project today, it will not be ready in 1 year or 2 years. It will take at least 7-8 years for this project to be built. So therefore, our comparison should not be based on today. Our comparison should be based on the future date when this power plant is expected to generate electricity. And let me tell you why this slide is important, because this slide shows us that cost-wise now are worse off if we went with renewables, but I predict that the same pattern will happen with the storage. Now they are telling you that storage is very expensive. Now they are telling you that storage is not there. But if Saudi Arabia, for example, built a nuclear power plant, it will be ready in 10 years. But in 10 years, I can assure you, storage will be there. So another comparison between sources is the role of natural gas. And this is important because the main argument now with dispatchability is this baseload thing. And I do challenge this baseload thing. I think energy markets are changing fundamentally, and this traditional concept of peak load and baseload with the existence of smart grids, with the existence of interconnections and demand management, I think it's fair to challenge it. But anyway, even if we accept it, natural gas now can play a much better role to cover the so-called baseload. So just I'm aware that I'm running out of time, so that's why I'm rushing up. Some aspects of nuclear power, I mean, importing nuclear power is not like importing car factory. I mean, this is a very sensitive industry and requires a lot of political agreements and international agreements. You can think of it as like a long-term marriage that you cannot get out of. It will provide the provider some political leverage, even if not pronounced. Especially that those providers will have control over a substantial part of your generation. This is particularly the case with Jordan, because Jordan grid is very small, so any nuclear capacity will have a massive portion of that. If we look in the literature, especially that Russia is very interesting, because Russia, most of the nuclear programs in the region are Russia-related or will be financed ultimately. Russia itself had a history of, or long history of using energy as weapons. I think if you ask some Eastern European countries about the gas ultimatum that they face every winter, and if you look at what happened last year with the Ukraine when the power grid was hijacked and the whole Ukraine electricity system went down. So I think energy being as a weapon, especially by these countries, is maybe not likely, but something that we should not also overlook. The last thing is about the emergence of non-state actors. Again, this goes back to the sensitivity of a nuclear power, because it involves some materials that can be used for non-civil or non-peaceful purposes. I did not mention state-to-state actions. By the way, here in the Middle East, we have a history of states attacking nuclear facilities in other states. We have Israel attacking the Ozairak reactor in Iraq. We have Israel attacking a suspected facility in Syria. We have Iraq attacking Bushehr in Iran in the Iraq-Iran war. So we have a history, but let's not talk about state-to-state. Let's talk about non-state. And this is what you see on the screen as a snapshot from Reuters I took a few months ago. And the Houthis, they said, they claim that they have fired a ballistic missile on Al-Baraka power plant. Let me tell you something. That was wrong. That was propaganda. But that's not the point. The point is not if this is right or wrong. The point or the concern is that the Houthis thought about this. They thought that this could be a target. That's, for me, the worry. And the Emirati response was very arrogant and was very saying, no, we have all this under control and we can stop these rockets. Again, this, for me, shows not taking this very serious issue very non-seriously. So if I have to wrap up, I think I have two takeaways from this presentation. The first one is the role of nuclear power in promoting energy security in the region is at least questionable. All the deployment scenarios in all the countries have substantial economic weaknesses and sadly some serious security vulnerabilities. Thanks.
Questions? Please. Radia. It's okay, it's okay.
Say nuclear power, I would consider as well that it's need to be considered in the national context, and each country have I would say the liberty in certain sense to select the best choices in terms of alternative source of energy, and the choice of the United Arab Emirates is justified by a certain consideration. The other aspect also that maybe given that I worked so much on the Russian case, I would not consider that relevant that we say that Russia used the gas as a weapon, which is not the case. And basically we cannot compare gas to nuclear power because they are two different aspects in this sense. Thank you.
Dr. Adnan, you want to respond? You want to respond? Well, let's move to Dr. Adnan and then.
Hello. Yeah, I don't question the questions you raised. They are valid. But I think one can always sort of put a question on the table, but if you don't have at least some kind of an answer to it, you should not treat that as a fact. So when you say, I believe that, for example, batteries will be solved in 10 years from now, on what basis is that? Is that on evidence about whether battery energy density, solid state energy, solid? We know, yesterday I mentioned that we know that batteries in the past used to have the energy density about 1/50th of liquid fuels. And now it is about 20, the best of them. And that has to do with material science. It's not a question of faith, it's a question of material science, chemistry and what have you. So there is still potential to bring that down, but I think I would not be able to say 100% it will be the same energy density in 10 years from now. So that was an example. The second point you raised, which is valid to question it, but not correct to sort of have a leap of faith about the answer, what will happen in the future. You pointed out correctly that the Barakah, for example, nuclear power plant, 10 years, when it was planned, it was estimated something like 7 cents per kilowatt hour based on all of the calculation, which is still more or less what is going to end up be except for the fact that they are delayed the startup of their nuclear power plants by about a year or two, for some other reasons, had to do with manpower. So that probably will increase it a little bit, but not much. And at the time they did the planning, the forecasted, at that 2013, you showed correctly what was the cost of renewable, much higher. And now we are at this level. And you pointed out correctly that there is a difference, because one of them is a base load, and the other one, so the base load means I provide the kilowatt hour when the user needs it, and the other one is that I provide the kilowatt hour when the sun is available, not when the user needs it. And you point out that this could be resolved, and I'm sure it could be resolved. The question is that at what cost and when? And I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. So I think it's correct to raise the question, but I think it's not correct to suggest policy based on what could happen. So I would just want to, share with you these views, and hopefully we can have a debate about it. Thank you.
If I may,
I think your paper is in the line of that we frequently hear, which is the search for the optimal solution, okay? Is renewables, solar better than nuclear? Is CSP better than photovoltaic? And so on. I think this is a wrong problem and the wrong question to ask. We need a variety of sources of energy. We need a menu of different sources, and we need diversification, because diversification of sources is per se a factor of security. You don't know the future. You cannot put all your eggs in one basket. So the question is not whether solar is better than nuclear or nuclear is better than solar. The question is what kind of mix of different investment and different technologies I should be looking for. Now, the reality is that neither is happening. Very little is being invested in renewables. The region is going on burning oil and gas for power generation and relying exclusively on this technology, which is, generating electricity out of hydrocarbons. And this makes it extremely vulnerable. So any diversification away from that creates some diversity relative to exclusive reliance on oil and gas should be viewed positively, okay? In this discussion, you should consider scale, which you are not considering, in addition to flexibility and dispatchability. Of course, dispatchability is very important, and I fully agree with that. I don't think in 10 years' time you will have cheap batteries in a scale such that you will be able to significantly diversify the power generation fleet, relying exclusively on renewables. But in any case, the United Arab Emirates are adding perhaps, I think in total less than 1 gigawatt in renewable projects, while the Baraka is 7.5 gigawatts of capacity, okay? And in terms of production, actual generation, the Baraka plants are likely to be running flat out 8,000 hours per year, while the added capacity in renewables is not going to give the same. So I think, the question that you are asking is not the right one. The question that you should be asking is whether nuclear can be an acceptable form of diversification in a situation that is today extremely vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you so much for very insightful and helpful comments and questions. Let me start with Radia. I think, yes, nations, they are entitled to come up with their national strategies, but me as an academic, I'm also entitled to say that this is right or wrong. And I think if my voice has an impact, it's great. If not, at least I'm doing my job. Also, for some of these nations, I'm not sure how much of these ideas are their own ideas or the ideas of consulting companies, and this is a different debate to go all together. Now, for Russia and natural gas, okay, fine. Let's not talk about natural gas. Let's talk about nuclear. So why Iran wants to enrich uranium? Of course, it has a lot of political connotations. Of course, they have their own political agenda behind it. But one of the rationale, one of the reasons Iran wants to have nuclear is that Russia did not deliver uranium to them before as promised, because Russia was forced by the international community to not to deliver uranium. And now we are paying the price of that. Now the price of that is that Iran is using that as an excuse to say, no, I want to enrich uranium. And because of that, Saudi Arabia now wants to enrich uranium, and so on. Dr. Adnan, very nice to see you here in Beirut. I don't care about energy density. I am the consumer. I care about kilowatt hour. I don't care how it's generated. I care about dollar per kilowatt hour. If the dollar per kilowatt hour is cheaper, regardless where it comes from, I'm happy with it. I think I mentioned this disparity about peak demand versus base load. Professor Luciani, yes, I think to say that energy diversity does not have a benefit, that would be unfair. I agree with you. Energy diversity does have benefits, for sure. But all I'm trying to say is that this benefit comes at a cost. And energy diversity have an opportunity cost. Maybe the UAE can diversify their energy mix with little financial problems. But Jordan, for example, if Jordan wants to diversify, then if they go for diversity alone without considering opportunity cost, this might end up very, very costly. So I agree with you, but maybe if we go micro level to the country by country, then this argument actually, in some cases, you are right. In some cases, I think I would be right. For the batteries, and this is again, maybe just to summarize my comments, I am not a member of Greenpeace. I don't promote renewables because for me, even in the numbers I use in my research are all numbers generated by investment banks. Why? Because I believe investment bankers and financiers, they are technology neutral. They don't have emotions about, by the way, I come from a nuclear engineering background. I did my PhD in nuclear physics. So I like nuclear very much from a scientific point of view. But when we look at the cost, at investments in nuclear and what financiers, it's enough to say that it's impossible for nuclear to be project financed, impossible, because of the liability. If you look anywhere in the world on nuclear project, it always requires government intervention, be it in sovereign guarantees or be it in other forms of subsidies. So I think that's from my.
Thank you. Can we move on to the second speaker? We have Jan Amrat from the Lebanese American University. She will speak to us about the effects of gasoline prices on car fuel efficiency in the MENA region. The floor is yours.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. I will be presenting my paper today about the effect of gasoline prices on car fuel efficiency. It's closed. Oh, closer. Okay, sorry. Okay, so before I start, I would like to thank you for allowing me to present my paper today at this conference. Okay. First, the primary objective of this paper is to test the demand for car fuel efficiency in the Lebanese car market, and in particular, to test whether or not rising gasoline prices shift consumers' demand toward the most fuel-efficient cars in Lebanon. The previous papers that were conducted on the relationship between gasoline prices and the car market, they were usually carried out on developed countries, of course, and that's why our paper is the first paper that addressed this topic on the Lebanese car market, and we have evidence from a developing country. We're using car population data. During the decade between 2000 and 2010, there was a sharp rise in fossil fuel prices, and it was accompanied with increases in gasoline prices. This triggered U.S. automobile manufacturers to modify the fuel efficiency of the cars that they are producing. And therefore, they started producing low fuel efficient cars because the demand for large fuel inefficient cars started declining. And many analysts declared that the changes in the vehicle fleet composition was significantly due to increases in gasoline prices. Since then, studying how the automobile market responds to changes in gasoline prices became a topic of great importance within the energy economics literature. Why Lebanon? Why did we choose to conduct our study on the Lebanese market? Lebanon characterizes a case of interest as it is a non-producing country that only depends on the import of cars from international manufacturers in order to satisfy the needs in order to satisfy consumers' needs and the demand for cars. Using a unique data set from Lebanon, our study, using a unique data set for Lebanon that covers 17 years of monthly data, and this data is on new and used imported cars to Lebanon. Our study adds to the existing literature by providing new evidence from a developing country where empirical studies on the car market in Lebanon in general and on the demand for fuel-efficient cars in particular are scarce. Most studies in the market, most studies evaluate the markets of car-producing countries, but for car-producing countries, changes in market share for different car types is mostly attributed to changes in consumers' preferences and consumer tastes and preferences. However, for car-producing countries, which are most of the time developed countries, it is as a result of changes in both consumer and producers' preferences, which makes it a much more interesting topic to study it on developing countries, according to Ahlan Glitches. The car sector in Lebanon is a basic source of government revenues because it's through the taxes and through the registration fees that are imposed on all imported cars. Also, the car sector in Lebanon is involved in creating local jobs related to sales, servicing, and maintenance. The new car market is directly connected also to the banking sector that provide loans and insures newly produced cars. So according to the World Bank, Lebanon has had 434 cars per 1,000 person in 2002, which is a very high number, and it's ranked 40. Now, Lebanese, according to l'Association des importateurs d'automobiles au Liban, which is the first automobile association in Lebanon, they consider that the Lebanese consumers are nowadays preferring small cars to large ones because of the lack of an efficient and an adequate public transportation system in Lebanon. There are many factors that may affect the market shares of various car brands in Lebanon and lead to changes in gasoline prices. Yet, a change in gasoline prices is naturally considered as one of the leading factors that affect the automobile sector. Now, numerous papers evaluated the changes in gasoline prices and their effect on the automobile choices made by US consumers. These papers take into account both consumers and vehicle characteristics, which include the age of the individual, the vehicle miles traveled, and the horsepower of the car, and many other characteristics. So, for example, LEAL used data on the number of newly registered cars in the US, and they find that increasing gasoline prices alters consumers' choices toward choosing more fuel-efficient cars. Killian and Sims in 2006 found out that there exist asymmetric responses to changes in gasoline prices in the US. Okay, so the data that are employed in our study, it's the data from Lebanon, and it's monthly data on new and used imported cars to Lebanon. It covers the period from 2000 till 2016. And during this period, there was a remarkable rise in gasoline prices. Data on imported cars to Lebanon was acquired from the Directorate General of Customs, and it's under the heading 7, from the Directorate General of Customs, and it is divided into 3 categories, and these data contain information about the cylinder capacity of the new and used imported cars to Lebanon. This data is divided into 3 categories, as I just mentioned. And one, it's the cars with cars which exceed 1,000 cubic centimeters and do not exceed 1,500 cc, and they are denoted as fuel-efficient cars. 2 cars whose cylinder capacity exceeds 1,500 cc and do not exceed 3,000 cc. And 3, the cars whose cylinder capacity exceed 3,000 cc and denoted as fuel-inefficient cars. Now, since GDP is only calculated is usually calculated on quarterly and an annual basis, we use imports per capita as in order to measure as a measure for Lebanon's macroeconomic performance. Imports we get the imports from Banque du Liban, and the population data is taken from the World Bank. Also, the monthly data on gasoline prices is retrieved actually from the Lebanese Ministry of Energy and Water, and is deflated using the Consumer Price Index for Lebanon, which is also provided by the Consultation and Research Institute in Lebanon. So we use imports per capita as a proxy for income per capita. So here's a graph of our data. But since we cannot we cannot depend on this graph to know how a change in gasoline prices affect the car sector in Lebanon, it's better to use a VAR model because we are dealing with time series data. By using our vector autoregressive model, we start by conducting a unit root test because most macroeconomic time series data are non-stationary, which may lead to spurious regressions. So to avoid this problem, we start our test by conducting an augmented Decay-Fuller test and a Phillips parent test, a DFGLS test, and KPSS test. As it can be seen from the results reported in the table, most of our data are stationary except for the LIN-YT, which is income per capita. But just the ADF test shows that the result is non-stationary. However, all the other tests show that it is stationary. So we consider that all our data are stationary. Now we run we run VAR regression for each type of car in the new and used markets, leading to a total of 6 VAR regressions, where type T denotes the type of the car, of the new or used car. Alphas are the deterministic factors. Betas, lambdas, and deltas are the short-run parameters that need to be determined. And AIT is the zero mean stochastic error term. So we then conduct the Granger causality test, which shows evidence that we only have Granger that the gasoline prices only Granger cause new mid-sized cars and used efficient cars. However, by looking at the IRF graphs, we can see that most of our results are insignificant, and some of the results are significant for just 1 period or 2 periods. And these are the results for the used market. So for the impulse response function, a 1% increase in gasoline for the new fuel efficient cars, we have insignificant results. And results are also significant for your used fuel inefficient cars. However, for the other cars, for the other types of cars, we just have significant results for 1 or 2 periods only. Okay, so as a conclusion, our study clearly rejects the main hypotheses and indicates that an increase in the real price of gasoline, it has no impact on the demand for fuel-efficient cars. And they also, the results also show that there is a large degree of heterogeneity among the 6 types of cars under consideration. The fact that Lebanon lacks a reliable and adequate public transportation system may be an explanation of some of the results. And it would be of interest to extend our study and explore the effect of gasoline prices on the automobile markets in other countries. Since using cars that run on gasoline generate many negative externalities, more research should be conducted on the Lebanese market in order to find out which policies may help to reduce airborne pollution. And due to the lack of data, this paper was just limited to sales data by type and did not account for consumer or vehicle characteristics. Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you very much for the excellent presentation, and thanks for drawing the audience to another topic. Well, basically, I just shared that there is an issue in terms of data availability. Yes, I thought that we have problem microphone here. My voice is already, and it's confirmed that in Lebanon there is obviously no impact whether you increase the price compared to the number of cars. But I will provide you with much more updated data because we are finalizing a report in this sense. But I also suggest, and we may use like also your research capabilities, look into, after we publish this report early this year, next year, that obviously it's to correlate in terms of looking the investment in infrastructure within Lebanon, which is absolutely compared to all the Arab countries. It's a report on the MENA region, specifically for Lebanon. What you need to look at it is the total absence of infrastructure, public transport, obviously, but more importantly is that the infrastructure in terms of roads, in terms of, how to say that, bridges and things like that, especially in the mountains, and basically the solutions, and based also certain report from the World Bank, when look at that, if you want to move to, how to say that, much more efficient, sustainable transport, and I guess Mustafa did the work also in terms of looking the emission from the transport sector, including in Lebanon, whether promoting the use of natural gas, where there is a potential in Lebanon, specifically in the transportation sector. And would really look at to collaborate with you in that. Thank you.
Other questions? Next is Dr. Hassan.
First of all, thank you for having us in this conference. Our paper, proposed paper and presentation is slightly a bit different. It's going to really focus in on one particular kind of technology. We're going to focus on the commercial scale, hybrid solar photovoltaic diesel systems in 3 Arab countries, Palestine, Lebanon, and Iraq. Why these 3 countries? Oh, I'm too Why? Basically, is there a laser on this one? Yes. It's the red one? Yes. 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 Yeah. Basically, because each of these countries has more demand than what the utility is being able to supply, be it in less generation capacity, be it in high network losses, as you can see in this particular grid. Palestine, of course, is one country. Unfortunately, it's treated as 2 different regions because they're not geographically interconnected. So West Bank has its power mostly coming in imported, and Gaza has 1 power plant only, and really half of its demand is unmet. All these countries have massive amounts of diesel generators running in every city and every corner. So, yeah. Also, just a bit of a brief on the policies that exist currently in these 3 countries that try to promote renewable energy. Basically, there's a net metering in Lebanon and Palestine. I'll talk a bit about how it's being implemented. We have customs exemptions on solar photovoltaic items, and we have soft loans that are present, especially here. The solar PV diesel system is a very important system for such nations. I won't go into details about it, but basically, you have the PV that synchronizes with the diesel generator when there's no power from the grid. And then when the power from the grid comes on, the PV automatically synchronizes with the grid. Having storage at such a scale, commercial scale, is optional. It's a case-by-case, you take it on a case-by-case. For example, if there's a facility that on Sunday doesn't run but still needs a few lights and what have you, then having this storage option could be feasible, because then you can shut down completely the diesel generator. Another important graph I want you to know is this one on the right. The more the diesel generator is running to its fullest, the more efficient it is in terms of every liter it consumes from fuel per kilowatt hour it is making. So another important point is that many times in many sites, and you need to actually shut down your solar power to protect the diesel generators. They have to run, as a rule of thumb, on at least 30% capacity. So if it's 100 kilowatt diesel, it has to run on 30 kilowatts at least. So this entails a certain curtailment of solar photovoltaic. Okay, so what's the integrated appraisal? Basically, sustainable development requires that we look into things from the dimensions of the environment, the social, and the economic. So an integrated appraisal tries to capture these three elements by using certain tools. And in this paper, we're going to use energy analysis, energy in, energy out, life cycle assessment, and then integrating the results into financial appraisal and economic assessment or social cost-benefit analysis. So first, just a bit on the method used. We use two indicators for the energy analysis. The simple payback period, which is basically, for example, in the solar PV, it takes energy and material and pollution to actually make it, transport it, install it, and at the end, even to recycle it or to throw it away. So what energy does it take to make it, and how much energy does it give you over its lifetime? This is the simple payback period. The displaced payback period takes into account that the solar PV is actually displacing the grid, the utility grid into operation, and the diesel genset electricity. Okay, life cycle assessment. I'm sure you all know this, so I won't take too much time on it. It's basically a framework to analyze any product since its inception, manufacture to transport, use, and disposal at the end. So here what we've done is that we've conducted an LCA on a diesel gensets. More or less it's the same for the three nations. We also did a LCA on the photovoltaic systems using the country-specific yields, solar radiance yields, and of course a separate LCA for each of the three nations' grids. I won't go too much into that. We use the EcoInvent database and CIMA Pro software. Importantly, in life cycle assessment, you have inventory, you have then the characterization of the impacts, but then at the end you have to, you can take it a step further and do a life cycle impact assessment method. There are many impact assessment methods. So we try to find the one that is most in harmony with our goal of monetizing the environmental externalities present in installing these systems. And we found really one that was globally valid, because there are many life cycle impact assessment methods done in certain countries for certain specific countries, be it Europe or Sweden or Japan or what have you. So we use the stepwise 2006 method. And just to make sure, we use another method just to take into account the greenhouse gas emissions as well. So it was two ways that we went about it. The final one is the financial appraisal and economic cost-benefit analysis. Very quickly, financial appraisal is really an investment perspective, a private perspective. So we take into account persons or institutions' view of installing these systems. economic cost-benefit analysis, it takes a more bird's-eye view, and the boundaries includes all the costs and all the benefit, regardless to whom these may accrue. So some similarities that we went with the supply installation cost for both. You don't include taxes and subsidies for the economic cost-benefit analysis. You include externalities only for the economic CBA. And in discounting, we use the weighted average cost of capital for the financial appraisal, but the social discount rate for the economic CBA. Okay, so the results. Basically, the simple payback period for the countries is around 6 years for Lebanon and Palestine, meaning when this PV system is installed, it will take 6 years of this PV system operating before it returns the energy it took to actually make it, transport it, and install it. A bit less so in Iraq. For the displaced payback period, it's much more optimistic. It takes just 1.6 years, 1.7 years, and 1.07 years for Lebanon, Palestine, and Iraq. The LCA here, it's monetized $2018. And you can see here the diesel generator, 1 kilowatt hour for Palestine, the production of the PV, and the low voltage grid here, and the same thing for Lebanon and Iraq. And you can see that really the most costly in terms of generation is the grids of Lebanon and Iraq. For every 1 kilowatt hour generated, the externality cost is around $0.4. And this is quite a lot. You have to keep in mind that LCA takes into account the potential impacts. So it really aggregates across space and time to come out with these potential implications. And this is why we went ahead in this one and we just focused on the greenhouse gas emission implications as well. So you can see as well that Iraq, for every kilowatt hour generated, you have 1.77 kilos of CO2 emissions. So when we did the analysis, first the financial, so it doesn't take into account the externalities, you can find that all of them, the net present value, using weighted average cost of capital of around 10%, you find that the net present value is quite a lot, even if you take into account the level of how much the PV is not giving. So 20% scenario here means that we have lost 20% of the solar PV generation potential just to safeguard the gensets that are working. The internal rate of return is very high, and the discounted payback period is also very high in Palestine. Same results for us here. And here we took two scenarios. In Palestine, the electricity tariffs are not subsidized. In Lebanon, they are. And so for the subsidized, it's the one in the orange, and the unsubsidized is the one in blue. But overall, you can see the results are also very, very good. In Iraq, things are a bit different because the tariff is subsidized too much in Iraq, the electricity tariff. So if you take the subsidized rate, you do have negative outcomes for the financial appraisal of the solar photovoltaic. And also you can see here that it's still roughly low IRRs if it's subsidized. If you remove the subsidy, things will become much better. I didn't include the dynamic payback period here graph because in many cases there is no, the system does not pay back its investments worth over its lifetime. For the LCOE, just a comparison, the levelized cost of electricity, you can see in these three countries that it can fall down to almost 6.8 or 7 cents per kilowatt hour is the best case scenario in Lebanon, less than 8 in Iraq, and almost 9 in Palestine. And you have, of course, different scenarios here. And you can compare those to other generating technologies. Okay, turning to the economic results, they including the environmental externalities, increases the benefits of this system a lot. And you can see now that for every kilowatt hour invested, the net present value has dramatically gone up for all the examples here. And using CO2 alone, which is then, it doesn't take the full range of the environmental externalities, things are also extremely good, I mean, good for solar photovoltaic. Okay, so last two slides. Basically, what this says is the following. PV is a no-brainer. Integrating solar photovoltaics, especially in the commercial sector, to hybridize with diesel gensets returns a lot of money to those who invested in it. So the number one, though, to make things even better is to remove the subsidies on the electricity rates that we pay, especially in Iraq. And this is a World Bank study that said if you remove the subsidies in Iraq, you would not impact the poor. Inversely, you'll even increase the GDP of Iraq by 1.6%. The second one is the net metering policy. Palestine and Lebanon have it, but how they implement it is another story. In Lebanon we have it. We know that it's not being implemented the way it should. And these institutions, the commercial, industrial, they at least are not operational or not fully operational, at least 52 to 100 days a year. So this is all potential for the production of these systems to be integrated into the grid and then estimated for them when they use power from the grid back. Last but not least, in Lebanon we have some substantial support for renewable energy. There was the NERIA loans, there's the LIREF loans, and now the EBRD with the JEF loans. These all can be used to take a soft loan with a grace period, and which means that basically there's a positive cash flow when you invest in these things, meaning for every time you pay back this loan, you're paying less than what you would have paid if you had still been running on diesel and the grid. So extending these loans to Iraq and Palestine will do good. Last but not least is that many of the assumptions and data undertaken in this study were adopted from studies done outside and then changed in the SEMA Pro software to account for different transportation and local issues. But it's important, and also for the to monetize the damages. These are done from studies outside. I think that we really need to step up our first-hand data in terms of life cycle impact assessment, data, the inventories in specific, and the damage costs related to the power generation in the countries of the MENA region. And at the end, last but not least, is when you have such positive results, and I'm not saying they're 100% true or that I'm certain, but I mean, if they are, we have to make sure that they be communicated to policymakers to make the required change quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Hassan. Excellent presentation. Any questions? Stephanie? Then Ali.
I'm curious to know if you factored in the space needed for the PV installations, what that looks like, and then especially if you want to supply, say, Beirut, what the grid infrastructure might be, because that can be more difficult in densely urbanized areas.
To answer? Yes. Thank you for your question. Around 3/4 of all the PV installations in Lebanon are happening in the commercial industrial sectors. And one of the main reasons is that there's space, rooftop space for these. So the study does not go into the residential aspects. Although for residential aspects, hopefully when we have reform and utility is better managed, and we can then do what's known as wheeling of power. So if you have a home in the village, you can put your solar PV there, and what you export there can be credited to your home in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Hassan. Very interesting presentation. Also, you stole my question because I worked with Walid on the case of Palestine recently, and there was a disparity between Gaza and the West Bank. Gaza is very densely populated, and also a lot of, I'm talking about the residential part, just between parentheses. Also, on top of that, you have solar water heaters that also take some of the space that you would need. My comment, also question, is the prices, the levelized cost seems very promising. It's really encouraging because you said 8 cents per kilowatt hour. And for me, this is below what Gaza and the West Bank is paying Israel, because 90% of electricity in Palestine is imported from Israel. So the cost they pay is 9 cents to 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So if you are achieving this kind of costs, then this is a clear merit that it should be taken seriously. Thanks.
Yes, I agree fully, Ali. And just the last slide. Really, a lot of the information we got on Palestine, we reached out to a university in Palestine, Al-Najah National University, and they helped us with the data because they also worked on European-funded projects. So we got first-hand data on the cost of the solar. Now, as you said, there's a lot of discrepancy between Gaza and the West Bank, but it's like the levelized cost is like an average of these two. But definitely, unfortunately, you have to treat each one the same. An example, and here Ahmed, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the cost for fuel in Gaza, for diesel, for fuel, is 50 cents per kilowatt hour, which is, and this is due, of course, to the supply, demand, the blockade, and what have you.
One last question, please.
Doctor, how will the scenario looks like after the gas starts to producing from offshore?
Lebanon?
Yeah. I mean, it will compete with the renewable energy because it's now available and it's offshore, next door. So, did you figure it out, or is it subject of a study just to go along with the
Well, no, it's outside the scope of the study, but if you want my opinion, I really feel renewables are moving fast. And of course, there's still the storage issue that needs to be solved at a larger scale and quicker. I do believe natural gas is a needed fuel, transitionary fuel that we need. I think they're complementary. I think nothing can stop now the solar power, the penetration that's happening, because it's just economics. Take away all these externalities, although I believe you shouldn't, but take them away, and you have a clear-cut case of economics, and it's getting better every year. The efficiencies are higher, the costs are lower. So it's just, I don't think nothing will stop renewables anymore. So
but it would be good because your study has been, it's really quite thorough, taking the social aspect also into consideration with this one. So if you would, as a preemptive future look to the energy requirements of Lebanon, it would be really nice to really see what kind of a combination would best be so that the government, especially the Ministry of Energy, at least would have a
I agree. I mean, this is personal opinion outside. I really believe that while so much time has been taken and the country politically stagnated for years to develop our oil and gas sector, and so many things are happening, beneath the politicians' feet, a quiet revolution is happening. So I don't know from now to 7 years when this natural gas is out, what is the outlook, energy outlook from now until then. I am a believer that renewable energy really gives back power to the people. And now we're analyzing a bit at CEDRO all this issue about crowdfunding and blockchain and what have you, that each individual now can invest in a renewable energy, even $100, for example, and get back a return. So something is happening and something quick is happening. But I don't know from now to 7-8 years, if 7-8 years is really the time we need to extract gas.
Thank you so much, Hassan.
It's a great pleasure for me to be there to talk about the Tunisian case. So I would like to thank all the organizers of this conference for the opportunity and also for the very, very good organization. So thank you very much. My presentation will be about the impact of energy efficiency policies on the integration of renewable energies for the case study of Tunisia electricity mix or system. So I will begin by presenting and discussing the evolution of the energy balance for Tunisia in terms of primary resources. So for Tunisia, we have more or less constant supply with we have more or less constant supply with an increasing demand, which results on a positive balance until the 19th of the last century. And then, since the beginning of the actual century, we have a deficit which is being more and more large. Okay. So, with such situation, we have an exponential and an increasing subsidies. So here we have governmental direct subsidies for energy sector. In 2013, the subsidies reached 5,300 million Tunisian dinars. We have 43% of these subsidies are allocated for oil products, 41% for electricity, 16% for natural gas, and about 1% for energy conservation. So let's go to the evolution of electricity demand. For electricity demand also we have an exponential growth. The rate of annual growth in the last 3 decades was about 5%, and the national electricity demand in 2016, for example, was about 15,000 gigawatt hour. And the electricity demand is expected to be about 16,000 of gigawatt hours in 2020. For the electricity mix, we have an electricity mix which is based on fossil fuels. For 2016, for example, we have an electricity mix. The electricity mix was based on combined cycle and steam turbine power plants. And the part of renewable, we use only wind, is very, very small. So here we have the primary energy mix utilization for electricity production in 2014. And we note that 93% is natural gas. And about 50% of this natural gas is imported mainly from Algeria. So the energetic situation in Tunisia is the main characteristics for the energetic situation in Tunisia are a big deficit in the primary energy balance, a large amount of subsidies, a high level of electricity demand with a high rate of growth, and an electricity mix based on fossil fuels. So we need it is clear that we need energy transition by more energy efficiency and by more renewable energies. The question is how we will do this energy transition, how much, mainly for the renewable energies, and which kind of renewable energy we have to use. So to find response to these questions, we used modelization. We used Osmosis, which is an open source energy modeling systems. It is a bottom-up model, bottom-up dynamic and linear optimization model. For Osmosis, we consider with the basic model of osmosis, we consider only the demand side management, but we introduced also with the basic model of osmosis, we consider only the supply side management, and we have introduced the demand side management. So this model aims to calculate the lowest net present cost of an energy system to meet a given demands. The demands for energy are met by different kinds of technology competing against each other and defined by a set of economic, technical, and environmental parameters and policy goals. And it is used for long-term energy planning by developed and developing economies. So it is a model. It is an open source model with different blocks. The most important block is the block defining the objective function, which aims to minimize the total net present value of the studied or the considered system. And the main important decision variables are the rate of activity of each technology and for each time slice, the new capacity that have to be installed, and the online capacity. And we have different kinds of constraints. The most important one is obviously the production. The production must be greater than the demand. We have also a constraint about production and demand target, constraints about storage, for example, and so we began by defining the reference energy system for Tunisia with the actually used technologies. There are fossil fuels technology with wind, and we considered also future technologies to be used. So we go from primary energy, local production or imports, to satisfy the end use in terms of low, middle, and high voltage electricity demand. Considering this system, we aim to search and to find the best mix that allows us to satisfy the demand with the lowest net present value. So we considered the time domain between 2010 to 2030 with different time slices, with different technology existing and future technologies, and with two scenarios. The business as usual scenario for which we will have 5% of electricity generation by 2030, and the renewable energy scenario with 30% of renewables by 2030. So here we have the main results that we obtained. We have the production discount. We have the production discounted costs through all the time horizon, and for the two scenarios, the business as usual and the renewable energy scenario. We note that at the beginning, at the beginning, the business as usual scenario is the most interesting. It is we have less global costs, but by 2030, the renewable energy scenario is more interesting. For electricity mix, with the business as usual scenario, the most important part of electricity is generated by fossil fuels. We have only 5% produced by renewable. It is mainly PV and wind. With the renewable energy scenario, for sure, we will have more renewable energies. And the most suitable source is wind. Then we have centralized PV. For installed capacities now. For installed capacities, we note that for renewable energy scenario, we need more installed capacity than the installed capacity needed for the business as usual scenario. We can explain that by the fact that when we use renewable energy, since renewable sources are intermittent, we need to have a greater backup. So we need to have a greater capacity to be installed. And the problem that for the main problem is that for the Tunisian case, we have a fluctuation for the electricity energy demand, and the difference between the minimum and the maximum demand is being more and more important. Here we have the minimum and the maximum for the year 2010, and then, excuse me, we have the data for the year 2015. And we note that the difference between the minimum and the maximum is larger. In this work, we tested the effect of introducing more energy efficiency, so to reduce the peak demand. Excuse me. So what happens if we reduce the peak demand? To study the effect of energy efficiency, we introducing the peak clipping. So it consists on reducing the demand during peak periods through scheduled outages. And also we consider the load shedding, which consists in cutting electricity supply by zone during a period to manage the demand and avoid blackouts due to the incremental peak of variability of renewable energy sources. So the load scaling could be associated to peak clipping if it is targeted, well planned, and programmed in advance. So peak clipping will allow decrease the peak and avoid the system operator from using costly technologies, low efficiency, and polluting technologies. And then we will have, we introduce the system reliability, which is the rate of the satisfaction of demand of all customers. And with the system reliability, we modified the constraint about the demand. So we will satisfy the demand with a probability of having, we will allow the system to have a probability of a non-satisfied demand. And then we compare the obtained results. So here we have the results obtained for the business as usual scenario with a reliability of the system of 99% to 97%, and then the renewable energy scenario with a reliability of 99% to 97%. With the accumulated net present value. And here we note that for the renewable energy scenario, with a reliability of 97%, we have almost the same costs that the costs needed for the business as usual scenario with a reliability of 99%. So if we reduce the reliability only by 2%, we will have a renewable energy scenario which is competitive to the business as usual scenario. So for conclusion, we note that the decrease of the reliability of the power system only by 1% has allowed decreasing the costs of renewable scenario by 0.12 billion 2010 US dollar, and the costs of the business as usual scenario by 0.14 billion 2010 US dollar. The total cost of renewable energy scenario at reliability of 97% is equal to the cost of the business as usual scenario at 99%. So 13.5 billion 2010 US dollar, achieving 30% of renewable energy in the electricity mix with 97% of power system reliability is as costly as a business as usual scenario with 99% reliability. The 2% decrease in system reliability while integrating renewable energy and could be assessed through energy efficiency actions such as peak clipping. So decreasing system reliability could be seen as an energy efficiency action, boosting the implementation of renewable energies in the power system. And such action could be integrated alongside renewable energy government's objectives through outage tariffs or smart meters. I think also that is something which is very important to keep in mind. Before going on any energy transition, I think that it is important to begin by energy efficiency. So to have the true and the real needs for the Sadian country or region, and so to have then the most suitable solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions Please go.
Actual curiosity, Sia, thank you very much. But does Tunis has energy building code for the energy efficiency? I'm sure you do. And what you're presenting, I believe also you have a law for renewable energy, something like this, right?
Yes.
But my question is, it's not effective, it's not enforced well. That's why I see the difference between the demand and supply, big difference. Why it's then your energy code is not effective?
They are effective, but not enough.
I mean, people not obeying, not taking, not... Yeah, okay.
Actually, I want to thank you and I want to congratulate Tunis for the tremendous work they are doing in the energy efficiency, and it's leading in the Arab region. It's the best indicators when it comes to energy efficiency. In response to your question, actually, Tunis is among the Arab countries who first worked on the building codes. Specifically now what they are doing, and we just started to work with them, not in terms of how that implementation, what they already have, it's upscaling the energy efficiency and how to ensure that it's, how we say that, on the building stock, because this is where the critical potential, obviously not only for the Tunisia, but in the Arab region and worldwide, the building stock is the most important. But in Tunisia specifically, what they have in the ANME is doing really tremendous work in this sense. So basically what they have is, when you do the upscaling, what they have is the question that you said, how to enforce that. And for this, there is a work plan that we are doing with them, and to ensure that after the coming 3 years, we would have a pilot country in terms of having showed the result.
One last question.
What is the percentage of the residential load? The residential load is about
30%.
Because generally the problem that the gentleman is saying is residential load. Residential load has a problem that they don't obey when you tell them to shut down their electricity. If there is an increase, it will increase heavily because of heating and also cooling.
Yeah. There is the problem for residential sector. We have a high amount of the demand of the energy, and the problem that is a sector which doesn't generate PIB, GDP, and so it is a problem which when it consumes a lot of energy and doesn't create GDP. And also it is difficult to control the residential sector.
Thank you so much again. Thanks for you. And so with this, we conclude the conference. I would like to thank each and every one of you for staying with us till the end. The sessions will all be uploaded on the AUB channel, the YouTube channel of AUB by tonight, by tomorrow, okay? And the presentations will be posted on ESCWA website, as I understand. Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.